Like, let's take the individual and society just a little bit, and communal a little bit further. I think a great topic is congestion pricing, the kind of paradoxes of congestion pricing, where you're asking people, okay, you've had rights to the road for generations, and now we're going to change those rights, and we're going to see, and we're doing it, we think, as a society for good reasons, but obviously the tension between the individual and the communal really plays out. So obviously London went through this, Stockholm went through this. New York is now in infancy, and my understanding is that in the London example, it's proved more popular over time. Like, people came to accept it when they were very resistant. In New York, so you look at what the goal of the communal is. The goal of the communal is, okay, we've got terrible gridlock, we've got terrible pollution, we have accidents and pedestrian deaths especially, right? And people can't go to where they need to get because they're stuck in traffic. So let's do something. And public transportation is hurting because there's not enough public funding to adequately keep public transportation working, especially post-pandemic when the ridership went way down, of course, and hasn't necessarily gotten back. And when ridership is important for the financing. So the goal here is, okay, let's set up a system where if you drive into the heart of the city, you have to pay for the privilege, which you never had to do before. And all the money generated from that is now going to go towards capital expenses for public transportation. And obviously it's trying to set up a virtuous cycle where fewer people are driving because they don't want to pay $10 every time they drive into the city center. They're going to then choose to maybe get on public transit instead. So the people that are driving are putting their money's going to improve public transit. As public transit improves, more people will choose it anyway, just naturally, because it's available, it's cheaper, it's faster, and it's clean and safe. So you sort of this virtual cycle. Pollution will go down, and the air will be cleaner. Plumbers, let's say, can do 4 jobs a day because they can drive and park right in front of the building instead of being stuck in traffic, and they can only do 1 job a day or 2 jobs a day. They would gladly pay $10 because now their profit is going to be it's a good investment for increasing their profit. So there are all these virtues that seem apparent, and yet it's like touching a third rail in society when you tell people, number one, we're not going to, you're going to have to, you no longer have this free privilege of going in. And New Jersey, the state of New Jersey sued New York City to stop this because they said this is inadvertently, now New Jerseyans are going to be paying for New York. It's like a tax on New Jerseyans that they never had to pay before. And federal government's attacking, and local, and then even like business owners were like, well, we're going to lose business because people can't drive and park right in front of our, so it creates this very interesting tension between, like, society thinking that this is a good communal activity, but then it's, individual rights feel like they're being undermined.
Sorry,
Yes.
Certainly, there is evidence that it's working in terms of health. That there's that people are having healthier lifestyles because of less pollution now in London. But the interesting thing, though, is the public transport hasn't particularly been. The fares keep going up. The trains. If you use the trains regularly to get into work, they're overcrowded. They are very, very packed.
Is it the case the same where the money raised by the congestion pricing is going for public transit?
Yeah, well, this is the thing that you don't, if they're not going to allow, you hear some complaints where people say, well, if they're not going to allow me to drive in, then you got to improve the public transport, and it's not being improved because it's expensive, it's crowded, and it breaks down a lot. If you get a train into London for work in the morning, it's not uncommon for, a track signal not to be working. And then there's a whole load of delays. So you think, so therefore, you got one side working, it seems, with the congestion and getting pollution down, but the other side of the public transport, area, it has not greatly improved. You get more modern railways, more modern trains, certainly. But like I say, they're expensive and are prone to sort of break down fairly regularly. I mean, you use them as well, don't you? You use that yet? So it's a strange one in London.
I mean, if it's strange in London, you can imagine Rome. Because in London, you have 15 lines of subway.
I think, there's few new ones introduced.
Okay, whatever, in any case. You have almost a capillary way of serving the city. And I always say, I would ask to pay a tax even higher than the one you pay to be in the city of London with your car in Rome. And I would be happy to oblige to pay some insane tax to use your car in the center of Italy, of the center of Rome. But first of all, I need to have the right system of public transportation.
Yeah.
And I would make all the bike line possible if I have the right condition to do it. But having a Ferrari without having the keys to turn it on, it's ridiculous. And now there are immense investment in Italy because of the funds that arrive from the European community for the resilience and restart of economy. Is called the plan, always a positive name, which in reality is hiding the immense rise up of the debts of Italy because those money have to be returned. So I understand if I spend this money for a good reason, and I'm completely disappointed when this money are spent only because they're available and someone can make what we call in Italian magna magna, where they take the money and they spend a lot of money for nothing. So for instance, recently I've been cut off, I don't know how many thousand trees in Rome to make some transformation of the city, to create more bike paths, many of which are completely impossible to be used. And some has been dismantled after being built, so wasting money. For instance, they put 2 lanes on 2 different sides of a tunnel under the Vatican, Porta Cavalleggeri, and they realized that the level of pollution was rising up horribly because narrowing that path where a lot of buses, because of the Vatican, are passing. It was insane also because no one is so stupid to go with a bike under a tunnel breathing the pollution of buses, for instance. And many other things like this, which were completely illogical also because the pavements in Rome are so bad. Because I always says, the movie, The Great Beauty was filming up. I would film down to make the great ugliness because we have the worst kind of pavement made of asphalt, both of sidewalk, streets, and there are a lot of holes on the streets. So using the bike or the motorbike or the cars on these streets, it doesn't work. With no public transportation working, there is always some traffic congestion, and it's extremely dangerous for bikers because at the end you have some bike path that start from that wall, so you have to consider that wall like the one of Harry Potter, where you can get in, and ends up on that wall. So nothing. So something, the bike is arriving from the planet Mars, land there, drive for a kilometer and disappear. This is ridiculous. It is necessary to have some complete vision of the let's say the biking path, but about the entire system of mobility, the entire system of circulation, solving the problem step by step in order to bring the Roman to say, okay, let's do it. There are movements of people that are also manipulated because, for instance, I'm a member of Italia Nostra, which is an important institution that is taking care about a monument, about heritage, about landscape, about all these things. And I have to admit that sometimes there are people with the blinkers like horses that are fighting things without knowing exactly what they are fighting. And at the end, saying no for everything brings exactly to the implementation of exactly what you would like to avoid. It's always better to say ni instead of no. Ni is half yes and half no. Because at the end, it's necessary to find the right compromise that is satisfying everybody. So saying no to the subway because of the archaeological sites, on one hand is reasonable, on the other hand is not that much, because now there are systems of underground that are much lower than the archaeological level. And then there is the problem of drilling, obviously, to have the entrance and the exits. And there are tools that are available. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the system developed by the NASA that allow to scan the planet up to 50 meters below the ground. So if I use these devices, instead of making the holes where I know that there is something, I can decide where I can do it. So it's not a rocket science, but it's probably not making the interest of someone specifically. And so there is the problem of making the subway. Okay, let's do the tram lines. And I had a discussion with a person who said, no, you can't do the tram line, because to have the electric line, you have to drill that building, which is a listed building, to have the. So what's the hell? We used to have a fantastic system of tram line in Rome. So if we recreate these things, if we simply restart from what we used to do, we can solve the problem, which is something that is satisfying the needs of the entire community and the needs also of the other people, because there is also the problem of disabled on wheelchairs that has to be solved. And with the streets, with the pavement we have, that is completely ignored. And there is a law that is made in 1985 that is obliging to demolish any barrier for disabled. But we still have all these things. But because at this point, it's horrible to use this word, but it is called, even if it's not existing, it's called the lobby of cyclists. Cyclists, sometimes they believe to stay alone on this planet. Sometimes they are much dangerous than cars, because they run believing that they are alone, and they are crossing a sidewalk where are ladies with the strolls, or an elder on wheelchair. And that's another problem. But then what is experiencing now Rome, as all the historical cities, is this gentrification not made with the humans, with the, let's say, richer versus poor, but is the gentrification for touristic reasons. And the easiest way to do that is to make the life impossible. So in Italy, I don't know abroad, but in Italy, when you build a building, or even if you transform the use of a building, you have to respond to a minimum standard of urban facilities, urban infrastructure. So we pay taxes for cost of construction according to the cost of construction, and taxes to create urban standards, among which there are the parkings. Recently, I don't know the precise number, but I can make some estimation of more than 30% of parking is lost. It's lost first. They started because of COVID to allow restaurants and bars to build the dehors outside, which was a temporary rule to allow these people to have their seats outside, to have a more healthy condition. All these things have been roofed, have been closed, and for a while, nobody paid any tax for having these things. Recently, to rise up money because of the financial condition, they allow to regularize these things. And so parking are lost for that. Then it was this idea of the green revolution to make the building more efficient, which was obviously not to make the building more efficient and to do something sustainable, because if you want to do that, you have to build with the durable material that are reducing the consumption of energy, instead of put on a building industrial toxic materials, which are lasting in 15 years, whose life cycle is not responding to the minimum standard for being considered sustainable. Among these things, they offer out the creation of on public land of the charger for electric cars, and it's forbidden to park if you don't have an electric car there. So people were step by step obliged first to buy a new car or rent a car which has the possibility to be used and park in there. But a lot of people had no longer any place to park, even if taxes were paid long time ago to have the minimum standard. And this is a good way to say people in the center, because these things are happening in the more profitable place for making touristic speculation, to make the life impossible first for the elder, because when you start changing the policy of the rental policy and there are no longer grocery shop and they can survive and they don't have a car, and they can, even if they have a car, they don't know where to park the car, they are forced to escape to the suburbia. So this is something that is presented as a super sustainable way of making the sustainable mobility and a clean cities, but in reality is a trick to allow the market to sell Italy to whoever wants to invest and make the life of citizens impossible, which are then getting mad with the tourists, because sometimes you can see tourists go home. Never read in my life phrases like this. But people are really upset because of what is happening. And this is made by those that are present themselves as a super liberal persons that wants to do something for the city. And this is not the interest of the community, but is the interest of this very little oligarchy that is deciding for everybody, damaging the community and the individuals, because nobody is taking any advantage of this way of making policy. So sometime when someone is indicating the moon, we don't have to see the finger, but we have to see the moon. We always need to go beyond the phrases that are made with this greenwashing or claim technique to convince people about good things, because the side effect of these things are going to be discovered in in a few years.
Yeah. So we've explored a bit the tension really between individual, like daily life, like just trying to do you need to do in daily life, and, what seems to be possibly true communal things. And then obviously also the things that are happening that are not truly communal, but being just top-down kind of decisions that are driven by other motivations. I think it'd be interesting, like Nahi just shared with us her experience during COVID of finding community in a kind of tough condition, and really that being a super important thing that continues to this day. I described my experience of seeing how important it is when say the beauty of a spring day or a fall day, that people have this great desire to, like, in my general urban place, the desire to be out in a communal environment. And it's almost like a celebration of humanity. I think it'd be great if we could go around and say, okay, Dennis left and he was worried about us being too pessimistic. So I'm so in the spirit of his presence to say, let's think about sharing like moments where we can say, in our daily life now, what are great examples of the spirit of the communal that we can point to, and maybe compile them between ourselves and say, okay, that gives us hope that or maybe not, hope is the wrong word. What can we judge about society today from those anecdotal experiences? Are those pointing to something positive of the autonomous individual who has the wrong attitude, who's functioning, and so forth?
I promise that tomorrow I'm going to talk about something super positive. it's really the subject of what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, because I always like to see the glass half full instead of half empty. And so really, I'm not saying this because of what I said earlier, because it's really what we should do. We can do, learning from great lessons and understand how to go forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's why I'm Nancy today. So tomorrow we have people.
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. One, which I have some experience of, and another just which I've more read about. Go with the latter, because one theme today has been about digital technology and media, and whether it's sort of having a negative impact on communities. Now, one very obvious form of new digital work is the gig economy, and one area that's become very well known is particularly around things like Uber, transportation gig economy, Uber, Deliveroo, those sorts of types of gig work, which are now global. I mean, it's not just in the West. It's all that type of work has now spread sort of to many, many countries around the world. Well, I suppose something like the gig economy, you might think, well, this is going to atomize workers even more. But what's actually happened is we've seen the creation of new trade unions to bring these workers together, actually coming from within this workforce, where they've sort of unionized themselves. And in fact, Amazon warehouse workers have unionized themselves. Even some high-tech Google workers have staged a walkout to support their more temporary colleagues who get less wages. So I think that's quite positive, because we often think maybe these are atomistic workers who are separated from one another, but actually new types of communities have developed. They've won greater rights in the workplace. I know in the UK, a new union was developed to represent Uber workers, and they got recognition for being real employers. So therefore, that's one form of maybe community that's come out of digital media. And then I think closer to home in the UK, for all of this sort of talk about, we've seen the rise of the far right. There's other much more progressive social movements which are really mobilizing people in the UK at the moment who do believe in social justice. And quite a few thousand people have suddenly joined these parties from nowhere. They haven't been in existence for that long. And so, that seems, a fairly positive development. And maybe it's the same in America with the latest marches against Trump, where people are, coming together despite, what they see as sort of more right-wing forces being dominant.
Yeah, there might be a lethargy in society, which I think we're all talking about a bit. And then there are things that provoke us out of that lethargy and then
take it to public spaces. So
yes.
All right.
You ask?
Oh, no. Oh, you mentioned Amazon, Uber, Deliveroo, which honestly, now talking about the Italian experience, people are really mad with them because they don't pay taxes in Italy because it's not belonging to Italy. And it's not only damaging that, but it's damaging, for instance, the category of the taxi drivers, because there is some really unfair competition. So I always, when I hear the word Uber in Italy, my skin is boiling. Amazon, the shopping malls kill the retail, and Amazon is killing the shopping malls. And people are getting obese because they believe that they are smart because they buy from their sofa, the anthropolectus I mentioned earlier. So I think the future is to bring back the shops where they must be, which is part of that Marshall Plan I was mentioning, today and I'm going to talk better tomorrow. To have a widespread shopping malls, also because these things are destroying the local economies. First, because they don't pay taxes in the different countries, but secondly, because the way they manage the competition is so impossible to be balanced that at the end, the shop at on the corner has to ask costs which are impossible to be compared to those others. So obviously, as an individual, I can save money. I will buy with Amazon. Or recently, it has been advertised, because this is something, because now we're talking about these things that we can identify the subject, even if we don't know exactly who's the subject, except for Bezos. But recently, it has been announced as some incredible achievement, the creation of a supermarket completely automatized without any cashier.
Right.
Which is horrible, because I'm thinking at the old lady that goes to the supermarket, and probably that is the only person she can talk for 5 seconds.
Yeah, definitely.
This is horrible. We don't care about all the categories. We design cities where you must be addicted on car, which are cities that can work in a society that has no roots, like the places where this was created, and they don't care changing places, but transforming cities where people are born and grew up and became elder in cities where if they don't have a car, they don't have a future, means that we want to take the elder and park in a place for retirement, because without a car, and without maybe if they don't have children, if there's not anybody that can take care about them, nobody can take care about them. So the district made with the Billini, the Villettopoli we call in Italy, the polis of Villette, is something that works with the young people in a good health. But if someone starts having problem of walking, disability, or is getting elder, there is no longer any space for them. These are people that are disturbing. Yeah. And this is a very unjust society that cannot be taken in consideration.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I think it's an important general aspect when we are speaking about the public places. We have to consider these different generations. Very, very simple. They have different demands and they have to be included. Otherwise, as you outlined it, we have some like advertisement, optimized image of the human, of middle-aged, agile, more or less wealthy people. No? And the city is not only for them. No.
We had the same discussion in the UK about the so-called death of the high street, right? Where shops are going into decline because they're not being used, and there's thinking now about how do you still ensure people come in, and it's to make shopping an event, not just a spectacle, but there's activities for families to do, there's fun areas, there's other things the local authorities will put on to get people. But I do have a feeling that just as when digital technology really took off, digital culture and social media, we often heard about the death of analog technology. Now, a lot of that, certainly in the UK, has come back into fashion. More people are now buying old vinyl records, cassette tapes have shot up, using those. Yeah, DVDs, CDs, and so on. And some people argue, we're in that sort of post-digital age now where analog and digital are starting to work together. So I do wonder whether, people just want to go, they don't want to just maybe stay at home and shop and online, that they do need that public space to go and walk around and be with others. And often when a shop shuts down, I've noticed strangely on digital media, people start lamenting about, oh, I can't believe it's gone. Oh, I used to love that shop. You think, well, you didn't go to it. That's why it shut down, because people. But nevertheless, people in their memories talk fondly often among each other on social media about maybe a store that shut down that used to be there for years. But I do wonder whether, just as vinyl went out of fashion, now has shot up again and is back in the stores, whether the same will happen, maybe almost not naturally, but something, they will start going back to the high street, and because people need that. You're not going to get it by shopping online.
So what do they need and what are they getting? They're that I think is hopeful, right? That if either through nostalgia or just through deeper reflection, the idea of the high street, what's valuable about it? It's, I'm in a place where other people are. I'm in a place that has usually visual stimulation. I'm in a place where, there's an element of pleasure, right, of doing this. When I say pleasure in this sense, I'm thinking like the High Line in New York created a very interesting condition as a park. What it created was the passeggiata, or something that you can do in other countries. The Via del Corso, there's a Sol closed down in the afternoon and people can stroll. Well, in New York, strolling is called getting hit by a taxi, But if you go to the High Line, you can stroll because you're in the city, you're in city space. The stimulation of the incredible skyline is around you. The stimulation of being near other people is there. The High Line's jammed, actually overly jammed with people, but you're not threatened by the car. So people stroll, which is a very rare experience. You can also do it along the rivers, for example. You can do it on Fifth Avenue when you're like walking along Central Park.
No.
So, and you can do it in the park. So strolling, so I think people like the high street because there's a sense of human pleasure coming out, even though it's, of course, if it's about shopping, really, it's consumerist. I don't think it's just about shopping. I think it's about people.
The problem, you're not talking about the shopping for tourism, which is consumerism.
Yeah.
But we are talking about the everyday shops, the bakery, the tobacconist, the wine shop, and whatever, which is what is making cities alive. Because if you have shops, but are just shops where you can find some souvenir for tourists, that is, Venice is plenty of shops, but no one is for Venetians.
Right.
And they escape to 2 districts now are inhabited by the Venetians.
Right.
And Rome is step by step becoming like that. I've been a week ago to San Gimignano. Is no longer a city. Pienza is no longer a city. It's a kind of Disney World for tourists, and that's it. This is the mud. And it's necessary at the end, not only thinking about convincing people, because people are already convinced, at least in Italy, people would like to work, to live and shop along a street. What has to be changed is the policy, because at the end, who's so brave to open a shop if she knows that is going to shut down in a while because the competition with the Amazon is impossible. So it's really necessary at a very high political level to do something that is inviting people to invest on this. And this is not the only aspect. Earlier we were talking about the countryside. Who's so brave to invest in countryside, in agriculture, in a country where, because of European community rules and because of globalization, we know that there are restrictions on the production you can have, and at the end, how you can survive as a farmer. Now, there are absolutely absurd rules I don't know how many of you are using Facebook, but probably because I'm talking about these things and my cell phone is listening what I'm talking about, because anything I say, I receive some advertising about that. I'm not kidding, it is incredible. Yeah, there are advertising on Facebook that is an invitation to farmer. We can take your land hectares to install photovoltaic panels, because there are funds that are subsidized by European Community to produce a clean energy. So we are replacing crops with a solar panel, with a wind turbine. And what is the side effect of that? No one is working in the countryside. And then we start crying because of flooding. Flooding is a consequence of a countryside that has been abandoned. And if we simply read history, we know what happened after the collapse of Roman Empire. Because thanks to the Roman Empire, many valleys that were swampy valley were dried, and they were for the first time, they were able to walk in the valley, because the Etruscan, the ancient population, used to walk over the crest of the hill because the valley were dangerous. So the countryside was abandoned. And what happened in the Middle Ages, that part of Tuscany was flooding, and we had the impaludamento of the Val di Chiana. But that was not because of climate change. That was because countryside was not care. When you don't have a farmer that is removing the branches of trees that are falling into the river or into the canal, the water is getting out. When you don't have trees that are, the roots, it's keeping the ground, you have landslides. So we are causing the problem, and then we are accusing Mother Nature, but we are responsible for that. But we don't have any policy at the European level that is inviting people to invest in agriculture. And we don't have kids that are interested in working on that, because there is obviously no future. Who is so brave to invest on something that is going to be a failure?
No, in this relation, I want to address more general aspects, just as a perspective. No? So far, when discussing about place and citizenship, first of all about place, we had in mind the city. Huh? What if there could be an alternative way of a new kind of civitas living on the countryside, to, at least in parts, to deliberately neglect the city as a positive space to live in for human unfolding, but to say, okay, a part of our population, a part of willing individuals becoming new citizens, will go to the countryside in agricultural project. This is no new idea in history, but today, in an age of increasing urban agglomeration, and having in mind all these problems we have associated with these agglomerations, why not thinking about that? It would be a different model. It is not new, but it is radically different. As a civilized life and life in culture has been associated with the city more or less automatically. Are there alternatives to this vista?
But there is one of the greatest painting ever, probably my favorite ever, that I use as a cover sheet of my book, The Sustainable City is Possible, which is the one that is in Palazzo Pubblico in Siena, Ambrogio Lorenzetti, 1334, is the allegory of the good and the bad government. And he's showing, I'm sure because we were talking about Siena earlier, but it's showing the same image. Yep. With a good government. You can see the city that is under construction, people dancing, trade, and etc. The gate of the city is open, and the countryside is safe, is extremely well cultivated. There are people that are walking up and down, and no murder is happening. And then on the other wall, you have the bad government, and you have the city in ruin, murders, the countryside is flooding, is abandoned, there are criminals waiting to attack people. It's really a question of way we are managing. We can't separate the countryside from cities, because city used to depend on the countryside when we were smart enough to understand the importance. Now we forget, because sometimes we're living in a kind of virtual life, more and more virtual, and we don't understand that chicken is not growing in a box in the supermarket.
Yeah, this is one aspect, and the other, it's an important aspect, also this mutual dependency. And the more general aspect I wanted to address is a radical new vista on the very topic of civitas, citizenship. This old new alternative. Okay, is it possible to go in the countryside in small communities? This is no solution one for all, clear, but it could be an alternative vista. Let's leave this predominant perspective that civilization and culture has as its main place at the city. Why not thinking about new models in the direction of the countryside? I mean, deliberately.
And there are great traditions of, countryside lifestyle. I mean, there's the traditional family farm, which is almost like a compound in its own right. There's the hamlet, there's the village. And I definitely think when I talk about urbanism, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same for you. I think that's all inclusive, meaning that a village of 10 houses is, when I say the word urban and I think about all the benefits of living in community, I think from the scale of the hamlet and the village all the way up to the 10 million person city, I think there's a value definitely across those elements. A colleague of mine joined. Welcome, Ben. It's great to have you with us.
No, bless you.
So so I agree. I think there's, we're not, this is not an urbanization project in the sense that at least from my point of view, that can only exist in that context.
Mm-hmm.
So we have about a half an hour left. And one thing I thought that we should tackle, even though this is a tough topic, tribalism. We hear that word a lot. If we're talking about social media, we're talking about democracy, we're talking about community, individual versus the communal. We're now using this word tribalism to describe how forces seem to push people into groups that then are maybe self-reinforcing, fragmentation of society, and challenging perhaps democratic norms or habits that are looking at both personal responsibility as well as responsibility to your neighbor. Definitely challenging tribalism seems to be challenging, like the idea that the stranger that you run into is part of when you think of communal, they're part of that your communal existence. They're a stranger on your street or whatever. Just because they're unknown to you, doesn't mean they're not part of your community. So how, is tribalism a serious threat to democratic processes? And, how should we be thinking about that when we think about how place and meaning and citizenship and identity, how this is going to play out?
I just wanted to ask the question, is tribalism a consequence of the kind of divide and rule tactic or approach that's used by, you could call them like the ruling elite or the capitalist class? It's very effective, encourage people to other groups, which we see in abundance, and it seems to be working.
Tribal groups this is also a marketing instrument to sale, the special clothing, the special attributes they wear, the hairstyle and such things. And so it could also be that divulgates communities.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, one thing I think I'll just add to what's already been said is that liberal democracies are founded on a sort of a schism. Okay, so if you look at the founders of liberal theory, they will always argue, everybody is born free and freedoms, etc. And there's always a but moment normally. But, if you look at those societies over there in that country, they're very uncivilized, actually. They probably shouldn't have freedom. And the classic example, I think, which I've sort of written about in some pieces papers and whatever. One of the founders of a liberal theory of free speech is John Stuart Mill. In his book on liberty, he maps out what he calls the liberty of thought and discussion, and it's often seen as one of the founding statements of a liberal theory of free speech. And of course, he says he defends, and it's sort of sometimes seen as the founding statement of an absolutist sort of theory that you shouldn't regulate free speech. If you don't like what somebody says, let them say it, including hate speech, and you can then tackle that in this marketplace of ideas. So, that sort of statement goes over to America, of course, becomes part of the sort of constitution, if you like. Now, what's interesting is when you actually read what Mill says, yes, he does map out, there's 4 elements to his liberty of thought and discussion. So I can never, I've written about, I can never quite remember what they are off the cuff. But it's, you've got to have opinions collide with one another, and then he maps out other types of this sort of ideal approach to free speech. Now, his but moment, though, he then says, but only those who can entertain and articulate higher pleasures should therefore be seen as being capable of engaging in free speech. You think, higher pleasures. And then it's, for him, higher pleasures are those people who have enough education to pursue their individual character. Okay? Mm. And you think, that's educated? Okay, that's obviously, of his time, it's going to be probably the elites. And then he's even more explicit where elsewhere on Liberty, but also in other works, he then says those with lower pleasures, and he does say who pursue a herd mentality, are those who aren't as educated. You think, who are they? And then he starts talking about people who become excited in a negative way through listening to trade unions. Okay, we get it now. So lower pleasures are people who aren't educated, and that's his but moment, right? And so I think he's everybody should have free speech, but those who aren't educated, not sure about those. And then he also is, he says that at the time, we had the British Empire when he was writing, and he says, those in the colonies are uncivilized. Those sort of natives, they maybe not, they're not ready for free speech. So liberal thinkers often have that schizoid element. And I think what's interesting today, certainly in the UK and in the US, is that division has become much more explicit and almost open and honest. So, you have somebody like Trump saying, those people who are his political persuasion, they're the real free speech warriors. It's these liberal lefty types who are, trying to censor people. And we have similar debates in the UK.
Right.
And you think, that's always been part of liberal democracy, where we've got freedom of speech, but there's always some people who don't deserve it because they're either uneducated or we don't like their ideas. And I think we live in a moment whereas liberal democracies often bury that schism, even though it does operate in various ways, I think we live in a moment where it's just come out into the open now, this schism, where free speech, it's even more explicit amongst some politicians, particularly on the right, that free speech actually should be limited, and it's quite right to limit free speech, and they're openly saying this. Whereas I think it's always been part of liberal democracy, but it's been buried a bit beneath, appearances.
I think, we're under this illusion in modern day democracy of equality. And there really is not such a thing as equality. That never has been and there never will be. Maybe under direct democracy, like in Greek times, there might have been more equality than before, but still the people that were running it were of a different level than the people that were below them. So I really think that when you don't have an equality, you always have the upper levels, whether it's financial, political, economic, whatever they are, intellectual, that will always have in their minds that they're of a better level than the people below them because they have attained that level or they're part of that level. So I don't think tribalism is anything new. I think it's an ongoing thing that's always existed, and it might be a part of the problem of the human condition from over 2,000 years ago, where this was all this was something that was never talked about, but it was developed and it became part of it. And then it got hidden, as it was stated before, under this illusion that it doesn't exist and everybody's equal, but nobody's really equal. I mean, we have to really be honest to ourselves and say everybody has different talents, everybody has different powers, everybody has different. I mean, in the United States, for instance, you do have an upper, lower, and middle class financially, absolutely. You have a middle class that's on the verge of being absolutely destroyed. And so you're going to have this separation that's only going to even be more, right? Because it's a consumer monetary level of tribalism. It's got nothing else to do with anything else. But I really think tribalism goes back 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. Yep.
I would look in a differentiated manner between social stratification. Well, I completely agree. And tribalism is a phenomenon in itself. It's an extra phenomenon that a group is, whichever group, is reducing itself from a larger societal context and gets an own identity developed in ways and that it becomes an exclusive, like a tribe. And the notion of tribalism is something primitive and archaic. A tribe is an archaic thing. It's not cultivated. This is more than just a social stratification. Tribalism, for instance, a rocker gang is tribalism. This is a tribe. And hooligans they are tribes. And this is tribalism, in my understanding. And when this interacts with the pronounced, how to put it in English, with the pronounced evolution of a social stratification going on in our recent times in the direction of wiping out in financial economic terms, a middle class. And if you combine this with this tribalism in its narrow meaning, also this archaic, these are archaic anti-movements. Also even a rocker gang, when I was young, I knew people from rocker gangs, and there are tribes, and they are proud to be tribes, and they do not want to be civilized and cultivated. They have their own culture, of course, and they want to be separate. Also in their own words, like some like some Kiowa Indian tribe. We are no part of this welfare society. We are extra. And this is tribalism. And the danger is, of course, that there can be evolve a sense for community inside these tribes. Yes. This is a precondition that the tribe keeps viable. But this is no tribe. Also, this is no community grouping. We, as a the supposed normals, the supposed others, have anything to do with. We cannot even argue with them because they do not want to argue with us.
The problem is also to decide who's deciding the word tribe, because this is a negative word.
That's a negative connotation.
And is a negative word, as we have a positive word to obtain something which is exactly the opposite we're looking for. Many times the elite, the well-educated, whatever word we want to use, the wealthy generally, are using negative words to define those that are against their ideal or their agenda. And so you can have tribes, if we want to use this word, which could be a consequence of a wrong policy, which is something that if we simply read one more time, I want to repeat the importance of urban sociology as a discipline that is studying the side effects of our job. And what I said earlier that shocked me when I was at that CN conference in Seattle, when they were proud to talk about the way of designing a district for the Latino community, for the Black community, etc., which to me is the worst way to be inclusive and considering the minorities or the diverse part of our society. So we showed them that we are kind because we are doing that. But in reality, it's because, as we say in Italian, far from the eyes, far from the art, and we don't care. But this is something that has been well demonstrated sociologically and anthropologically as a serious problem, because the more you ghettoize the people, the more you crystallize the problems, and the more people feel invisible and forgotten, the more they can react badly. Look at what happened in France, where I remember when I was a student of architecture in Rome, I remember my professor that were talking about what it was happening in France, in the France of la grandeur of Mitterrand, who imported low-cost labor from the former French colonies to build the grandeur building with the dream of becoming Parisian. And instead of bringing these people and integrate these people in Paris, they were parked in the so-called Ville Nouvelle. It was a rather positive word. Today, we call the Ville Nouvelle, we call banlieue, because they were horrible places. And I remember that I was still a student, and I just, on those days, made the exam outside of the School of Architecture. I decided to follow the course of urban sociology. That's why I'm so in love with urban sociology. And so I visited Paris with a friend I met yesterday here in Karlsruhe. And I remember we went to visit Cergy-Pontoise, Préfecture, Marne-la-Vallée, and all these Saint-Denis. And I told him, Michael, this is a powder cake. This is going to blast soon. And I was not some scholar of the matter. I was not Nostradamus. I was not Cassandra. But in 2005, that happened.
It exploded.
Because the first generation accepted to be parked there. The second generation was so-so. The third generation put the city on fire. And this is a consequence of these people that are forgotten. So in this case, when you destroy as a reaction the symbol of the kind of people that are obliging you to live that, we can use maybe the word tribes, because this is something that is really uncivil way of doing. But then there are other systems of creating a kind of tribe, because at the end is use the word, which is the way people from many different places, thanks in this case, this is one of the positive effects of the web. At certain point, we have an incredible number of, especially youths, that are now unified behind the umbrella of groups like architectural uprising, united against the ugliness, architerror, and all these things, because they are rebelling on the kind of cities, the kind of urbanism we have. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about something which was condemned horribly at the beginning when started, which could be considered the proto-version of this movement of people that are coming together, coming from many different kind of social life, different education, different places, different religion, different color of the skin, and act as one to understand how to change the living condition of the place where they were living. So, again, it's a question of understanding why people are working together. Is something that is spontaneous as a reaction that could be quiet or violent, or is a consequence of being parked and forgotten because we don't want to have them among ours, even if we claim to be very inclusive and respectful.
Yeah, good. In any case, the common positive point in the direction of generation of community is there is an intentional community, as to use this term. They unite by intention. They want something. They have an aim. Yeah, they have an ethos. They have an ethos. No?
Yeah, so we're looking at these issues of identity, community, citizenship, place, belonging, and I guess the word tribalism, which is generally used pejoratively, seems to apply to people, as we're describing, who feel, coalescing around an idea or a concept, coalescing around a something pejorative, such as like, I'm against those people, so everyone who agrees with me of being against those people, they're going to join with me and we'll be a tribe. But what is tribalism providing? Is providing probably a sense of belonging, providing a sense of community, and space or place, even if it might be virtually. And so, in essence, like the goal of, or the thinking about tomorrow's conversation, where we take us to the tangibility of the city, of settlement, of neighborhood. We might think when we talk about community, when we talk about identity and all these things, we think are almost inherent positive traits. But, tribalism in a way is saying, well, those are all that could be described as all those same things, but we're saying there's something inherently negative about it. So I think that's, and when we talk about the fragmentation of culture into individuals, but it can also be fragmentation of culture into groups. That's usually when we use tribalism, is to describe that fragmentation of the people who don't want to have really any relationship, that are not really open to debate between themselves, and they're almost, it's like an us or them kind of situation.
But, well, I mean, certainly there's that definition, an earlier one that goes back quite a few years now, going back to the 80s, in sociology, was to look at groups known as subcultures, right, which often used to emerge, for example, around new musical forms, fashion, to, for example, be punk, rock, or the new romantics and things like that. And they were often identified as tribes, but maybe in a more positive way. But the other side of that was the labeling of them by the media and some politicians as moral deviants. And so you have a moral panic around these sorts of subcultures, if you like. But those subcultures, those tribes, many of them would never see themselves as being against others as such, that they were just brought together, they would say, in much more positive ways. Right. Well, they shared values and fashion, music. Yeah. They were very creative, in fact. Right. And like I say, but the other side was that they were deemed to be moral panics by other groups.
Yeah, Nahid, please go ahead.
I just wanted to share a little bit my thoughts based on what I learned what you mean by tribalism or tribes. I think, again, not being too pessimistic here, but I think if we look at the origin of the word tribe, tribes originated because people, based on my beliefs and my understanding, naturally as human beings, we are afraid of unknown. So people gathered together, they built a tribe because they knew each other, they knew their practices, they knew their lifestyles and beliefs, and they built a community, and then they separated themselves from other people they didn't know, hence the other tribes. And we became civilized, and we built cities and countries and society, and we moved away from this concept of tribes. In certain countries we still have tribes in the traditional sense, and maybe not Western countries, but more in the Eastern countries. But I think that moving again in a modern way into the concept of tribes and tribalism, from my perspective, again, is moving into the human nature of being afraid of unknown. So it's a group of people who don't know what does certain things mean. What do people do? What they do? I am afraid. I don't want to go into their realms. I build a bubble and I invite people into my bubble. And then I build a tribe. I build a community of people who are as afraid as I am of unknown, and I stick to it. And then the more of these tribes that we have, the more difficult it becomes for these people to actually unite and build a society that works for everybody. And then the easier it becomes to rule over these tribes, because they are not united together. They're divided in their opinion, their beliefs, and the way they move forward and the way they build a society. So I think this concept kind of brings a positive sense to, or brings something negative toward democracy, because it is more difficult. It is easier to rule over them because they don't want to unite or they cannot unite, and it is easier to tear people apart from each other and to control them as much as possible, which is easier for the people in power to do.
Right. Very well said. Agreed. Ben, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it'd be great to hear your voice. We're about to wrap up for the day.
Yes, it's good to join, but I've joined late, so I feel I would risk something for contributing. I suppose just from the little that I've been able to hear as we close out, the thing that's on my mind is that in order for liberal democracy, well, I heard a couple things in the first comments that were shared. There's always a freedom, but maybe not for certain people, and there's also just a obvious inequality in the societies we live in. And both of those are provocative statements, but I think if we are to, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking about tribalism, and I'm thinking the antidote to it has to be some sense of a common understanding of certain endowments, that we're not free, or we're not free or equal because of what we have, but because of what nature has bestowed. We're free in our, or we're equal in something aside from just in our abilities or our possession. We're free because we're something we're equal because we're something. We're something by nature, and I think, I don't know. I think one of the things that's fractured in liberal democracies is a common understanding of what we are by nature, and so we have to, we're trying to fight for what endowments we have, if any, in common with those others in society, and there's a great disagreement about who we are as people and what the prospects of living together are. So anyway, that's just some of the thoughts I've had. I don't think there's really a common, I don't know. I think about what would cohere tribes together, and it would be some kind of common acknowledgement of nature, and what nature has endowed us with as human persons. And that's just not agreed upon, like what those endowments might be. And so, I think tribes are, I think what was just shared by Nahid, like there is a lot of fear or unknown in what others might think.
Yeah, and this is all again leading into tomorrow's conversation, these questions, and we're like provoking these things and probing them so that as we jump into deeper things tomorrow, we can like weave that in all these acknowledgments with all the different perspectives.
I think if we are thinking about other structures in new quarters, in renovated old quarters, perhaps we should also think about standing old houses, lost places, and to renovate it in a very simple way for other groups of communities, for example. Not all top down.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Obviously, it's necessary to make a distinction between or among buildings that deserve to be maintained and buildings that are absurd to be maintained because of the cost of maintenance, the constant costs of maintenance, or especially due to the suburban conditions. Because another problem we have today is the idea of talking about buildings of class A, which probably are in urban of class Z. What's the hell of having a super efficient building in the middle of nowhere where the urban structure is polluting more than the building itself? So we need to always go beyond and try to understand where is the trick, who has interest in promoting something instead of something else. And then obviously wasting money to replace buildings that deserve to be maintained, it's a pity. Buildings that are performing well in terms of consumption of energy, it's ridiculous. But buildings that are costly, we maintain, that's...
One short remark, total different angle. Huh? What you said about the nature, I think it's an important general point. Relating also to the equality of human beings. It's a modern thought from the Enlightenment onwards that the human being has human rights, every human being, and is by that equal to any other human being. No? This is a theoretical construction. No? This is a legal demand, so to say. No? The other aspect is there's a long tradition, in particular in the Western cultural sphere, about the so-called natural laws. No? So by laws of nature, this refers to some image of a cosmos existing.
Absolutely.
We are part of the cosmos, no? And from that we are all equal. And now the interesting point comes also in the direction for the discussion tomorrow, no? As regards inequality. Now, no, we might be all part of this cosmos and we might all have the same human rights, but we are different in our abilities, in our talents, and so on and so on. And the point is, the cosmological point and the point of community, how to bring together diversity in a non-suppressive way. No? So if you are different than I am, how we could collaborate and how we can enter into a dialogue, no? What we can do in common because we are different. What can we achieve in common because we are different? we can unite. We can unite our capabilities towards a goal. No? And let's collaborate in this direction. No? And when this idea of this natural law, this has been lost in the Romanticist era, when the overwhelming power of the individual being has been pronounced. And this has been lost. And when we are living today in these so-called consumer democracies, it's more or less isolated individuals, then we need a reshift. We should look at the themes to be tackled tomorrow, a reshift in the direction of this cosmic thinking, and in this human law.
Well, thank goodness we are different.
Yeah.
If if we were all the same, we were robots.
But clear.
And this is something that is completely misunderstood in the way fashion is presenting.
Yeah.
For instance, female figures provoking anorexia, or a kind of status symbol that everybody has to have it.
Mm-hmm.
This is really the negation of the individualism.
Sure.
And it's ridiculous that people are proud not to be individuals because they want to dress, make the haircut, make the makeup, and using the same shoes like everybody. This is a disaster. It's a social disaster that has nothing to do with the human being.
Exactly.
And we have to be proud that there are differences instead of pushing for some model that is equal. We need to have a unity without uniformity.
Ben, the floor is sure. Yep.
I would add to what's just been said that difference is what makes a city work. It's what makes a city vibrant. It's what Jane Jacob talks about, that there are various multitudes of people going about their individual choices and their individual needs. And that's what, that's the energy that makes a city thrive. It's not that everyone has common interests and goes through their day making their bread and families in the same way. It's that everyone's doing it all in their own way. And so I would just pick up on that comment that was made about, finding a way for difference to thrive in this cosmological view of the city as, we're all equal on some level, but the ways in which we're different is what generates a vital city. And we're not, there's so much that's wrong with our cities that have broken down. We're not even able to contribute our differences in ways that make our cities better because we've individuated our cities into, all of the lawyers go to this section of the city. All of the white construction trucks go to this section of the city. All of the home care nannies go to this section of the city. And it's, So I agree with what you said, that we have to find a way for difference, even if we are equal in some sense. Like the differences are critical to a city's function.
I think we should wrap up, but I was going to just bring up Jane Jacobs as well, and I think maybe she's going to weave into tomorrow's conversation even more. So from Jane Jacobs, I always talk about strangers because she really contends with the life of the sidewalk, like her examination of life of the sidewalk in a city is, to me, among the most profound observations of urban life. And what she says, and I've written this in papers or so forth many times, and so I'm not going to get the quote exactly right. She says, listen, a great sidewalk, a great street lets total strangers be in the same space with the right level of comfort and trust in each other that lets that operate, right? Lets two strangers have no relationship whatsoever. They can be in the same space at the same time, and they can be there, with no problem. And she says, if you take the sum of that over and over, day after day, week after week, and she says, the vast majority of that being fortuitous, not all of it. Obviously, there's crime. Somebody can be mugged, somebody can be attacked, and so forth. But if the vast majority of that is happening without incident, and you could even say fortuitous, that's where public trust can be built. Like public trust is generated by the sense that I've lived in, say, a city like New York for almost 25 years, and I agree with Ben, the energy living in that city comes from the fact that, I'm always surrounded by strangers, right? For the most part, besides the few people that live in my building, I see, and so forth. So like walking to the grocery store for me as a New Yorker and being in the grocery store and coming back to my apartment, I probably passed about 200 people I've never met, maybe more, in that one journey, one afternoon going to a grocery store on foot. And that's very different that if I get come out of my garage, get in my car, drive to the grocery store. Obviously in the grocery store, I'll pass other people, but I'll get back in my car. And by the time I'm in the parking lot, getting back in my car, I'm in that isolated world. And so obviously in those two different conditions, the relationship with strangers might be a little different. Like one, if I'm getting surrounded by strangers day after day after day, and, to me, that's actually stimulating because it's been fortuitous. It hasn't been problematic. I have a different maybe sense of strangers than other people who might feel more, guarded around strangers because of the daily life and how you've got to experience.
But she says something that is even more important in my opinion, because I always using this quotation of her, because she made this analysis in the moment when it was promoted that ridiculous idea of the New Jerusalem classless society, which was exactly the opposite. And it was promoted the zoning with the separation of function, talking about a modern city much more secure than the old one. She, that was not an architect, she was not brainwashed in the School of Architecture, made an honest analysis of an historical part of the city and the modern one. And she got to the point that the old one that was presented as insecure, that was much more secure than the other one. And the great difference walking on the sidewalk was the presence of the eyes on the city. She was talking about the importance of retail along the street, because that was making some spontaneous surveillance that was making the city more secure than a soldier with the guns, which are maybe scaring people, and no one is interested in walking in street like that.
So I think she should definitely, we should be happy and free to bring her thinking, because it's empirical and observational and deduction, which is, I think, still to this day among the most important contributions to urban thinking we can have. So tomorrow we're going to start, again, sorry to those from different time zones, we're going to start at noon Central European time, 6 a.m., say East Coast time. And we're going to be going, so Ettore is going to kick us off tomorrow, talking about community, democracy, space, and urban form. We're going to go from 12 noon local time to 12:30 or 2:30 again, take a break, and then have another 2 hours. And then we're going to finish with an open-ended conversation. And that's really going to be wide open, where we can go from here, what we might introduce into papers that can be submitted to Urban Edios after this. So definitely, no matter what time, you can join us tomorrow. If you can be here towards the end, definitely for that open-ended conversation, that'll be fantastic. And thank you, Nahid. Thank you, Ben. And we'll hopefully see you all tomorrow. It's been a really stimulating day. And hopefully we've excited you enough, Ben, with the short time you've been with us to rejoin us again tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for a great.
Thank you very much. Thank you.